So I want to welcome you all. Thank you so much for being with us today. We are, I don't know, we're on the hump. We're coming down on the backside of the hump. We've done 6 of these webinars. I think today is webinar number 7, and it is using data to inform student learning. Remember, we have 2 series going on, and I alternate every other week or every other series. This one's the blended learning series, and then we also have the student-centered series, which we'll catch on the next one. So a little bit about myself. I am Kim Loomis. Thank you for joining us. I used to be the digital learning director in Clark County, Las Vegas, Nevada. I retired in 2019, but they tell me that when you retire, you need to do something that you're passionate about. And I am so passionate about quality education and engaging students and digital learning. And so this is what I do. And I absolutely love it. I did author a book. It's called Think Outside the Box, the CIA of Blended, which we'll talk a little bit about today, and 10+ learning models for schools. Today's agenda is we'll start with thinking about data and how do we use data and when do we use data? Because, there's tons of data out there, right? So we're going to really talk about the reflective practice, trying to demystify data and thinking about how we can use data to inform instruction. And then really trying to get our students to own their data. So a lot of stuff going on today. And keep in mind, this is just like a preview because there's lots of extra learning in the extended workshop inside of Canvas. So please feel comfortable to go there as well. So let's go ahead and go up into chat. And when you think about data-informed decision-making, what comes to mind? Oftentimes when we think of data, I always try to think, when I think about data decision-making, I always think about those big data, like our MAP scores or NWA scores and our benchmark scores. And we're going to talk a little bit about that here. SLOs, good, Rosa. But we really want to think about and we want to demystify data. We don't want it to be too scary. We want it to be really accessible. We want to bring it down to, what is doable because, we are inundated with data on every day. So I want to show this quick little video. I love it because what it does is I want us to start thinking of data as more of a reflective practice. And the 3 steps that we'll see in this video are the what, the so what, and the now what. And how are we using those experiences to lead to personal growth?
What is critical reflection? We reflect all the time.
Please give me a thumbs up.
Anytime we think back on something that happened and imagine how we might do it differently next time. Critical reflection is similar, but involves a more formal process. It requires carefully considering how events and experiences have led to personal growth and how we might think or act differently in the future as a result. A critical reflection is not simply a summary of what happened or a report of how you felt during an experience. For a reflection to be critical, you must make connections between what happened, what you learned from that experience, and how you will apply that learning in the future. Your reflection doesn't have to be about a positive or successful experience. We often learn the most when things don't go right. The key is to choose an experience where you learn something important that has changed your beliefs or actions in some way. If you have been asked to relate your experience to specific concepts, make sure you choose an experience that you can relate to those concepts. One model for critical reflection is a 3-stage process known as what, so what, now what, developed by Terry Borton. Let's walk through the 3 stages together. Stage 1. What? What happened in a particular situation? Replay the event in your mind as though it were happening in front of you on a movie screen. What do you see? Be as objective as possible. Try not to attach any judgments at this stage. Stage 2. So what? Analyze the experience more deeply. What was important about the situation for you? How does this experience connect to course concepts? What did you learn? Stage 3. Now what? This stage is about applying what you've learned. How have you changed or grown because of this experience? How will you think or act differently in future situations because of this experience?
I'm going to pause it right there. I want to talk a little bit about the what, the so what, and now what. So when we're thinking about data, those are really what we want to think about. When we collect data, what is it telling us? So what are we going to do with it? What it's telling us? We're going to analyze it like we saw in the video. So what is it telling us? So what are we going to do? Do we want to do small groups? You saw over in the chat earlier. And then the now what? Do we only 3 or 4 kids need to be in a small group, or is it really something that the whole staff needs, so, or the whole class needs? So we want to think about this critical reflection. You'll hear me call it a AAA process, but also you want to think about the what, the so what, and the now what. I think that's an easier way to kind of think through how to use data. So let's demystify data for just a moment. Over in chat, guys, how many decisions do you think you made today? Just today. I mean, you analyzed a lot of data, right? Just today, how many decisions do you think you make in an average day? I know when I used to teach, I used to come home and I'm like, the kids would say, what's for dinner? And I'm like, dude, I don't even care because I don't want to make that decision, right? 7,845. Yeah, tons. We make tons of decisions on data every day. We actually make, on average, about 35,000 decisions daily. And 221 of those decisions are on food alone. So this is a lot of data that we're using every day, right? So let's just think about how much data that we're using on a typical day. So like today, what to wear when you go outside, right? Thinking about, okay, well, what's in the weather? Like this morning I woke up, I'm in, like I told you, South Lake Tahoe, it was snowing. So I had to ask myself, am I going to stay in all day or am I going to go outside? And if I go outside, am I going to be active or am I going to do something that's passive? Because those will make more decisions on what type of clothes I want to wear. If I'm going to stay indoors, do I have to do a webinar? Do I need a webinar shirt? Or can I just lay around in my sweats all day, right? These are decisions, and think of how many decisions we make just about what to wear. So we use data all the time. So I don't want us to think that the data has to be a big and mystifying, oh, how am I going to use data? I want to think about is where do we use data? Because there's such a broad range of instructional data. I mean, when you look at this slide, think about even the last webinar we did learner profiles. So we have a lot of information about learner profiles on there. That's some data that we can use, but we can also look at biographical data, behavior data, right? Do they even attend class? And when they do attend class, are they happy? Are they sad? Are they using the academic language? Are we using warm-up data? We got survey data, exit ticket data. There's tons of summative, informative data going on. So there's lots and lots of data, including, like we talked about, our quarterly benchmark data, those big, high risk tests that help us with our RTI. So there's a broad range of data. So when I think about how do we use data to inform instruction and to help students, we really need to kind of get down to some data that's going to help us on a daily basis, right? Because there's a lot of data that we can be using, but I don't know if I want to use all this data every day because I'm going to probably end up making more than 35,000 decisions in a day. So when we do data informed instruction, and I'll just pick on, like today, we started with, at the beginning, we did an informative inquiring minds want to know, right? We collect the data, we analyze the data, we can make some instructional decisions about it, plan and reflect on it. Those are the steps in the data informed instruction. Now, it doesn't matter if it's formative data that's teaching as we go, or if it's summative data, like a high risk test or an end of a unit test at secondary. Either way, what we want to be doing is gathering data from the learning results to determine what comes next in instruction. That's truly where we get to data-informed instruction. When we start thinking about what's happening now and where we're going to go next, and how does that help us? So when we're thinking about data-informed instruction, really what we want to do is we want to start thinking about a daily instruction. So if you notice here, we can start at the top. First off, some data that we can collect is who's in class. That's a lot of data. You have 25 to 40 kids in a classroom. Who's there? What's their demeanor? Are we going to start with a warm-up? And then we can go to, are they kids engaged? Are they having, academic conversations? Are they even on task? Are they completing their assignments? Did they master their assignments? And then we have an exit ticket. All of this can happen in a secondary classroom in a 50-minute class period, right? But when you think about, and I just put 9 different data points up here, but when you think about it, there is some data that we call performance data. It's instructional data. If I looked at the warm-up data, that data can help me inform what's going to happen in today's classroom. So for example, I used to teach math, right? So I would put 3 questions about the concept we learned yesterday as their warm-up. And I can use that data, or it could even be 3 questions from the homework. It could be the ones that I think that they struggled with to get an idea of, did they struggle? And that would tell me what I need to work on today. Right? The conversations I'm having with my students as I'm teaching by walking around, that's data that's going to help me inform instruction as well. Do I need to stop and pause and do large group, or do I need to pull a small group? And oftentimes when we look at the assignment and the mastery of the assignment, oftentimes we ask kids to do homework assignment and we don't collect the data. And that's okay. But it does help us to inform tomorrow. And our exit ticket also helps us to inform tomorrow. But what about all of that other data? Because like we said, there's tons of data that we're using on any given day. That's what we call behavioral data. And you and I know oftentimes if the kids aren't behaving correctly, we can't get to the academics. But the data that we want to look at is performance data. We want to look at that academic data that's going to help us inform instruction for what's next, like our warm-ups. Right? What's next? If I see that 60% of my students can't get through the warm-ups, then I know that maybe the lesson that I have planned for today might not be a good lesson because they can't get there. They're not ready for it. If I see that my kids on the exit tickets can't summarize today's learning, then I know that that's going to change the way I probably start my lesson tomorrow. So when you are thinking about how to use data to inform instruction, think about performance data and how you're collecting it. And I'm not saying you have to collect all of this. I'm just saying pretty much what we want to do is have some data every day that's going to help us inform today, and possibly some data that's going to help us inform tomorrow. All right, we're going to go into breakout rooms. In our breakout rooms, guys, let's see, we've got, I don't know, about 12 people today, so we'll just do 3 breakout rooms. I want you to discuss how often and when you're collecting and reviewing instructional academic data. Well, welcome back, everybody. It's hopefully you had an opportunity to discuss with your peers about how often and when you are collecting and reviewing data. I'm sure some of the stuff that we talked about just moments ago, like warm-ups and exit tickets and completion of assignments on a daily basis, some of that data that you're using to drive instruction, as well as probably your map tests, anything that you're using for RTI, maybe some of the software that you have in your classroom. So hopefully all those things came up in your conversations. So let's talk about the CIA of Blended and how using data to inform our classroom helps. Now, again, this is our blended learning series. So let's go ahead and define blended learning. I'm a true believer that blended personalized learning starts with the wisdom of the teachers, because you all are super, super smart and you have a caring heart. A computer will never have a caring heart. Kids will never have a relationship with a computer. But if we can add the intelligence or the adaptability of technology into our classrooms with its ones and zeros, it's going to give me lots of data that I don't have to crunch, that'll help me inform the learning environment for each of our students, so we can create a personalized learning space. So as you can see here, these 3 icons, the teacher, the tech, and the students, become really, really important in a blended classroom. I truly believe if you look at these 3 items, that they become our 1/3 in the classroom. So when we're thinking about instruction in the classroom, we should think about how 1/3 of the time I can release my students to learn from technology. Now that can be an iReady, Apex, IXL, there's a variety of digital content that you can use for delivering instruction. Now, I know it's going to be low-level instruction, but guess what? It frees you up to not have to deliver that low-level instruction for everybody. But it does give you wonderful bits and pieces of data that we can then use to help figure out, well, do I need to do small groups? Do I only need to pull 3 or 4 kids? Or do I need to pull a large group because there's a large misunderstanding? The other third on that other far end there is our students. And I'm a true, true believer that students peer-to-peer active engagement should be 1/3 of the classroom environment. It should be the opportunity for students to use our academic vocabulary. It should be the opportunity for them to use the 4 C's: communication, collaboration, creativity, and critical thinking, right? So we can think of 2/3 of the times, those 2 outside 1/3s, that we're releasing instruction to our students or to technology, that gives me 2/3 of the time to be teaching by walking around. It's 1/3 of the time where I'm really going to have to lead and probably push my kids to those higher orders by analyzing the data and looking at my standards and figuring out where I need to be. So again, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 tech, 1/3 teacher, 1/3 student. So I like to call this the CIA of blended. Releasing 1/3 of the time to digital curriculum, 1/3 of the time, we're going to change our instruction to a more guided instruction in this classroom, where 2/3 of the times we get to do teaching by walking around. And that last third is that authentic assessment. And really, when you think about it, it's formative assessment as well. It could be when I'm using IXL. It could be when I'm using Kahoots. I could be using a Google survey. I'm getting some information or some assessment data that I can actually use to help drive instruction. So when we think of the CIA of blended, I oftentimes like to bring up Deb's Web of Knowledge, because I oftentimes will use DOKs, or Web's Depth of Knowledge. So when I say the computer can deliver, or the technology can deliver DOK level 1 and 2, that's that low level stuff on the bottom of the Bloom's taxonomy. That's the remembering, the explaining of ideas, some understanding, recalling of facts. Computers are really good for that, right? That's a good place for that. But for us to get those kids to that strategic and extended thinking, that's where we really need to release to our students in the 4 C's, or we need to really carry and create learning environments for our students that are going to push them to those higher orders, because you and I know that that's what's in our standards. So when we look at the CIA of blended, former math teacher, I love this triple Venn diagram. We say 1/3 of the time we're going to use digital curriculum, which can carry DOK level 1 and 2, that low level stuff where I can let the technology or a video or somebody else explain DOK level 1 or 2, and then I'm going to use the data. That's what today's instruction is all about, how to use data to drive instruction. I'm going to use that data to help guide instruction. Do I need to do small groups? Do I need to do a whole group? Do I need to take a kid that's low and pair them up with a kid that understands? So using that data to help guide instruction, so I can push my kids to those higher order thinking skills. So today, when we think about data, I want you to think about where you're getting the SLOs. And Rosa, you brought these up in chat, right? The student learning objectives. And you'll know in software, they oftentimes will have that mastery base. And you've seen these before, the dashboards that have the red, green, and yellow. The kids have mastered it, it's green, right? And if they're having trouble, it's red. If they're somewhere in between, it's yellow. So oftentimes you'll see that when you go into your IXLs and your, iReadies, and even, some of your Apex courses, you'll see that they're all color coded. And I believe we can now do that in Canvas. But what we want to do is we want to separate performance from activity. And I'll give you an example. So I used to be the administrator at the virtual school there in Clark County. When kids did not come to class, that did not mean that we weren't providing a learning environment for them. It was a behavior. It wasn't a performance. Kids weren't failing the academics. What they were failing was their behavior wasn't showing up in their online courses. So we want to make sure that we're very clear about the data that we're using. And are we really looking at performance or academic data? Are we looking at activity, or what we would call behavior data? And like we said earlier, sometimes behavior, if a kid's sick, is going to lead to possibly poor performance. So keeping that in mind as you're looking at your data, especially when we think about how I can release to a digital content provider so it can carry those DOK 1s and 2s 1/3 of the time. There's lots of different data sources when we think of digital tools, right? You guys have seen the NWAs and the MAP scores, and there's tons of those out there. You can use that data to help at the beginning of the years, and we have our benchmarks in there. But also some data that we want to use is like and I saw it in our chat, was our 504s and our IEPs. And some of you possibly even have common assessments by grade level or subject area that helps us at a site-based data. In the classroom, and you saw the 9 different things that we said that we could collect, we have our grade books with our reds, yellows, and greens. We have software dashboards. We have lots of different places that we can use data. And even in an individual lesson, you saw the 9 different things that we said. Checks for understanding, thumbs up, thumbs downs, right? Sample works, observations, conversations, self-assessments. I personally, you see down there in some of those ones, I like to use Google surveys. It gives me great data to look back and see if the kids understand something. That's a great exit ticket or even a warm-up. I am a big fan of having the kids sign in so that I get individualized data. Now, if I didn't want them to sign in and I didn't really care about who knew, but I just want to know a big picture in my classroom, or what we would call anonymous data, I might use a Jamboard. I might set up, understandings on the left and the right and have them put their, thoughts and stuff up there so I can get a good feel for it. Some of you are using what we would call either Paradeck or Nearpod, where you can have the kids collect data individually as well as you're going through a presentation. So lots and lots of different data sources, but I will tell you, it's not that we don't have enough data. It's potentially that we have too much. So we live in a world where we have to figure out what's the best data that I can use to help today's lesson and the best data that I can help use tomorrow's lesson. So remember, it's data that's going to drive what's going to come next in our instruction. Because here's the thing, guys, if you look at this Legos, I love this image. Absolutely love it. Data is just a bunch of Legos, right? And we can sort it. We can even arrange it. We can even present it visually with, charts and graphs. But if we want to explain it, what is it telling me about Johnny? Or what is it telling me about Susie, right? That's where we can start saying, well, look at the data and how it explains the story of this student's growth. But what we really want to do is we want to make it actionable. We want it to drive our instruction. So not only does it tell me a story about Johnny or Susan, but what are the needs that Johnny and Susan has? And we're going to talk about student ownership because we want Johnny and Susan to also understand that they have data that can help inform their daily instruction. So when you think about actionable data, think about how you can modify your current practice to use data to inform your practice today and the practice that you're going to have tomorrow. So I love Legos. It's so awesome. It's a great, great story. So you saw at the beginning, we talked about the what, the so what, and the now what. I like to call it the AAA process, right? Because we know that data can tell a story, right? Think about that way. Anytime we collect data, it can tell a story. And we just do 3 simple steps: what, so what, and now what. In this case, it's AAA. So I would ask the data, what is it? What is the data trying to tell me? What can I answer? What question can I ask of this data? Do kids understand? Did I teach properly? Is the test valid? There's lots of different questions that we can ask. Well, then we can look at the data and look for patterns inside that data that can help us determine the answers to our questions. Because I might look at my test data and I gave my kids a quiz that had 13 questions on it, and every kid but 2 missed number 13. So that tells me something about that. Looking at that data, maybe I didn't teach it right. Maybe when I did teach it, there was a misunderstanding. So now step 3 is the now what, or how am I going to act? Well, do I need to reteach that? Do I need to pair kids up? Do I want to pull small groups? How do I want to reteach it? Maybe I can find a video on Khan Academy that helped me reteach those types of things. So again, it goes right back to reflective practice that we talked about moments ago, about the what, the so what, and the now what. And it's our reflective practice on what's happening with our data. So here's an example. You've probably seen this dashboard. This comes off of the Nearpod, cache dashboard. 24 students, 95% of the students participated. So I can tell you right now, one question that I was asked would be, who didn't answer, right? Who didn't participate, and why didn't they participate, right? Down there in the quizzes, you see the correct answers were 66% of the time. I'm gonna be like, wait, what does that mean? 66%? That doesn't even sound very good. And who answered those questions? Who mastered? Who didn't master, right? I need to know who needs additional support and who understands and can move on. That's the so what part. That's the analyze part. The now what, or the act part, is what am I going to do about it? Well, I might pull small groups. I might take peer-to-peer and have them coaching each other. I might conduct one-on-one tutoring if it's a small sample of students, because we can already see that some of the students didn't even attend to it. I might have to pull them and do a one-on-one. And possibly I have to ask myself, can I move forward? Or should I possibly reteach? So this is a critical reflecting that we talked about at the beginning with the video on the what, the so what, and the now what. Now, again, we can't do this with every piece of data. I truly believe that we as teachers have too much data. So what we need to do is find the data that's important to us so that it'll help us guide our instruction so that we can extend the learning to our students to get them to those higher order thinking skills. So think through, what data are you currently using What data do you want to use? And especially as we think about if we're going to extend our project and do the Canvas course, the lesson that you're going to do is where are you going to get some data? So when we talk about informing instruction, the now what and the so what, there's lots of different things that we can do based on the data. So when we see the data, if there's a large group of misunderstanding, I'm going to act differently than if it was a small group. If it was a small group, I might just do a small group intervention. But I can also see oftentimes, especially when I used to do my warm-ups at the beginning, is finding out if kids need scaffolding. Let me give you an example. I was in a classroom in Boston. I love this classroom. It was a 5th grade classroom. And this teacher started this 5th grade classroom with having the kids do a warm-up. There were 5 questions on the warm-up, and every kid did the warm-up, and it was on a Google survey. And the teacher used that data immediately to small group the kids. She was able to say, oh, I see where you're having misunderstandings. I'm going to put you into this small group. And she had 4 stations going on. And one of the stations, of course, was her teacher led. And so it was a great opportunity to see data in action. And she actually knew that the kids who got all 5, they went over to this one station, and it was totally awesome. The kids were doing, it was social studies. So they were doing like this planning of tracking of the convoy from the east to the west coast. And that was a really fun thing. And it was, think about when you have that data, when can I pair kids up? When can I take a really good kid who understands things and pair them up with a kid who doesn't understand? Now, if we had our learner profiles, we would know what kids can really work well together. So that helps us too, because we want to be able to improve learning, right? And when we think about improving learning, what we want to do is we really want our kids to own their own data, right? We want them to set goals. We want them to know that data is important, that they too can track their own data. And that's where we can come up with goal setting and one-on-one conferencing and looking at students and where do they need? Do they need one-on-one? Can we do student to student? Or can we use digital content to use students to digital content? Because we know that they have a misconception. So when we think about data to improve learning, think about the different ways that, one, we can gather data, but 2, what do we do after we gather that data? And how can we possibly, and you heard me talk about my quizzes, right? I like to look at my quiz scores to see if there's some gaps in my formative or summative quiz scores, because oftentimes if I gave a quiz on Friday and the kids did poorly, then on Monday we weren't going into the next unit. We needed to do some reteaching. So when we think about the schools and the classrooms, you've heard me say this many times over, I truly believe that the core business of schools is relationships and learning. So when we show the kids that we understand who they are in their data, as well as them as a person, and help them track their data, we create a stronger relationship. Remember that caring heart. Yeah, sure, in IXL and some of the software programs, the kids will have their own dashboards, but the kids need to know that we're looking at their dashboards as well, because that creates that relationship. That creates that caring heart that we've been talking about. And the learning will come, because if we think about a single student, they have lots and lots of data as well that they're looking at. And so when we think of a student in a holistic approach and thinking about an individual student, like we were talking about Johnny and Susan earlier, there's lots of different data that we can use. And I'm going to go to 3rd grade, multiplying of facts. We can track, or have the kids track, how well they're doing on multiplying of their facts. Have they mastered their 1s, 2s, 3s, 9s, 12s, whatever the case may be. We want to start thinking about our students and thinking about that holistic approach. Now you can see why the learner profile workshop came just prior to this one, because what that does is it gives us an opportunity for kids to really do what we just talked about here, is that critical reflective thinking. We want them to think about how they learn, what's the best way for them to learn, and helping them with their learning preferences. So that learner profile is a great place to go there. And if you weren't with us on learner profile, it's okay. You can always go back and you can watch that video. It is on YouTube at Nevada State Department of Education's YouTube site. But there's ways for students to think about how to track that data. So remember, data doesn't just belong to you. It belongs to everyone, right? So we want to use data with our students to empower them. We want to allow them to take control of their own learning. So like you see there on the left, that data, dashboard that gives them some information. We still want to create that relationship by asking kids about defining that data dashboard. We want kids to track their own data like you see there on the right. How am I doing? And heck, attendance alone would be a great place to track. Granted, it's a behavioral data, but it's a good place to start to have the kids doing some of that tracking. So thinking through, how can I get kids to track their own data? Because we want them goal setting. We want them tracking their data. We want them to set up steps for improvement and maybe even a time frame for that. Maybe one of the steps we want is 3 lessons out of IXL every week, right? And then they can start thinking about, okay, when am I going to do a lesson? I'm going to do a lesson on Monday. I'm going to do a lesson on Tuesday. I'm going to do a lesson on Wednesday. Oh, wait, I could probably do some lessons on the weekend if I have internet connectivity at home. So having them track it, and then having, again, we talked about relationships, having that one-on-one conferencing with your students so that they can see that you see them not as just a student in the class, but as an individual student. And that becomes really, really important when we start saying that data belongs to everyone. So what we're going to do is we're going to break into small groups again. I want you guys to start thinking about what data are you currently asking your students to collect and analyze, and possibly what could you be asking your students to collect and analyze. Welcome back, everybody. Hopefully you had some really good conversations about how you can actually ask students to own and analyze their own data. And keep in mind that this is just a way for us to also help build those relationships, which is the core business of schools, right? Relationships and learning. So asking the kids to collect and analyze their own data, having those one-on-one conferences, it's a great way to help students understand that we see them as an individual and as a holistic. If we go back to that slide and all the different data that we have on each individual student, we see them as a single student instead of as a large classroom. Keep in mind that several of the slides that you've seen here today, and I know that if you're busy taking notes, they show up in our Canvas course, so you'll have the opportunity to really look at and analyze those some more. So when we think about what's next, right? When we're using data to inform learning, I'm a big fan of digital data. Big fan of digital data. So what way can I do pre or post lesson data collections? And how can I do it? Can I do it in a Google form? Can I do it on a Jamboard? Can I get something real quick and easy, something that's going to help drive today's lesson and possibly tomorrow's lesson? And if I have a digital management system like Canvas or iReady or any of the other digital contents out there like Apex that you might be using, Khan Academy, that has a dashboard, then use that dashboard, right? But you and I know there's way too much data in those dashboards. What we need to do is identify what are the points that we want to track. And I'm a big 3 to 5 person. I always tell people 3 is always the minimum, 5 would be the maximum of things that I really want to track. And that can be including behavioral data as well as some of the academic data. But keep in mind, don't want to make sure you have a good balance. Don't lean on one too much and over the other, because we want to analyze those gaps and those opportunities. Remember, we talked about the what, the so what, and the now what, or another way to talk about it is the AAA process. I'm going to act, I'm going to analyze, and I'm going to ask, right? So ask the data what's going on. I'm going to analyze that data to find out what points I need to get to, and then I'm going to make actions or the now what for that. I don't know how many of you are using PLCs. If you are, you can put that over in chat. But if you're having some sharings and you're working with your grade level PLCs or your department area PLCs with common assessments, that's a great place to do some of that data and trying to turn that data into action. Now, the key, and I like this part because I'm all about student ownership. I want the students to own their own data. So think about what data you can ask students to track. Think about what you can do there. So as we're moving forward and we're going into the end of this, what I put inside of our Canvas course is better lessons. Now, I know that we've seen some of the better lessons. They have some master teachers in the blended learning environment. They have 40 plus little video clips that these teachers will share on how they're using data in their classroom and what software tools they're using to collect data and how that data is driving instruction in their classroom. So when you go into the Canvas course, you'll see a couple of links. I believe it's at the bottom of the Learn page there. Try to find a teacher that's in your same grade level or content area and try to get some tips from them. So I got to ask you, go over to chat. We've talked a lot today. You got the opportunity to talk to your peers. I gave you some good information today. What was a sticking point that you want to take from today? So what's a sticking point? I will tell you, one of my sticking points, I couldn't believe that we made 35,000 decisions a day. We've had some great opportunities here, guys. You have in this, if you want to take this a little bit further, then you can just figure out how you want to use data in your classroom, how you want to reflect on it, right? Building those relationships, having the kids, the holistic approach. I love these that are popping up over in chat. I want you to think about how you can use data in your classroom. And if you want that extended 5-hour workshop, that's what you need to do. And I'm not professing any particular tool or data, or, what data is it that's going to help you decide what you're going to do in today's lesson or what you're going to do in tomorrow's lesson. And you're going to go through the what, I love it, Krista, the so what, the now what, which is a quick way to think about it. And we could teach the what, so what, now what with our kids as well. It's easy for them to also think through their data in that same point. Love it, guys. I love what I'm seeing over into chat. So again, if you want to get those 5 additional hours for the extended workshop inside of Canvas, there's a learn page, which gives you additional information about tracking and using data, a grow page that talks about how to use it and how to analyze it in our classroom. And then the show is your assignment. It's the one assignment we have inside the Canvas course where you'll do this. You'll figure out what data you want to track and track it and reflect on it. Go through the process, go through the what, the so what, and the now what that you've done in your classrooms. So keep in mind, this is a very broad opportunity. It could be on warm-ups, it could be on benchmark assessments, but how do you want to use data? You'll know we have lots of different webinars, and I thank you for those of you that are new for joining us for the first one, but we do have about 6 more. Keep in mind that you can register for those as well.